Anyone getting? I got some snow from where I'm from. I'm up in the mountains, so Appalachia. So got some snow. Glad I made it. Right, Mr. Gaffney? Glad I made it. Let's see if this is recording. It says it is. All right. Nicholas Black Elk. Nicholas Black Elk. I'm assuming I don't have to spell that for you on the board. Nicholas Black Elk. All right. I'm assuming you know what those words look like. 1863, he was born, and he died in 1950. Yeah, so a pretty old guy. Got close to 100. Anyways, 1863 to 1950. He was born in what is now the state of Wyoming. And 1863, I'm not sure if it was the Wyoming Territory or if it was a state yet. I don't think it was a state yet. But if someone wanted to fact check me on that, to give me the exact date when Wyoming became a state of the Union.
It was after the Civil War.
Okay. Everybody except Mr. Henkel, because Mr. Henkel's going to be taking my job if I give him one more. No, that's okay. Did you got it, Mr. Henkel? I got you. What do you got?
It was 1890.
All right, what do you got, Mr. Gaffney? Excellent, sir. Ms. Miller? Okay, good, excellent. 1890. Okay, so technically it wasn't part of the United States yet. It was a territory, but it eventually became such, so let's see. Where's Mr. Henkel? Oh, Mr. Henkel. Might as well not even come to class anymore, Mr. Henkel. There's nothing I can teach you.
Whatever. At least not teaching.
Okay, sir. Not to dismiss my other students. I'm just like, I throw these extra credit points out there. You'd be surprised how many people just sit there and don't do nothing. And they miss it. Not in this class, though. A lot of people. Da-da-da-da. And it gets added on to your final grade, so it's not like your final grade, your ultimate grade for the whole course. So if you got an 88 for the whole course after everything's said and done, then you'll get an 89 if you got an extra credit point. Yeah.
I thought they'd be added to like participation.
Nope. If I didn't make that clear, I apologize. So thank you for making me clarify it. I appreciate it.
Better.
Huh?
Makes it even better.
I know. That's why I can't believe people just sit there. Not necessarily in this class, but other classes. I'm like, I think it's the date of this, but fact check me. I'm not sure if it's this date. People just sit there and let it go. All right, fine. So Wyoming Territory, what now is the state of Wyoming. So, he certainly is an American. His people were here in America, whatever word they called it in his language, the Lakota language. I don't know. But they were certainly here before America. So if anyone deserves to be called an American, it's him. And he's an interesting man. I don't think he became Catholic or Christian later on. I'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, later in his life. But when he was younger, he fought at the Battle of Little Bighorn, which occurred in Wyoming. He was a Lakota Indian, and there are apparently different types of Lakota. He's Oglala Lakota, also called Sioux. Don't ask me for all the distinctions. I don't know. Because I'm not Native American. But, for all the different tribes and groups. So even within certain groupings, you have different tribal stuff. So I think Sioux is another word for the Lakota. Don't quote me on that. I think that's why I have it in my notes. But just Lakota is what he's usually identified with, so I'll go with Lakota. Lakota Indian. Anyways, the Lakota Indians fought the U.S. cavalry, the United States, at the battle, what's called the Battle of Little Bighorn. Very famous battle. Yes, Ms. Walker? Of this guy? Yeah, no last name, Nicholas Black Elk. He's known as Nicholas. This is his Christian name, but he was known as Black Elk. You're welcome. I can't scream, so I won't say why. Why? Is Little Bighorn interesting to us? Anyone ever hear of Little Bighorn, the Battle of Little Bighorn? No? General George A. Custer? Yeah, I know, mister. I know. I got you. I told you. Who's in the take off my tie and put it on you, sir. Miss Lacey, yes? What do you got?
Never heard of it.
Okay, good, okay, we're getting somewhere. So it has been heard of Little Bighorn, General Custer. Does that ring a bell? I mean, it's not a major historical event. It's not major, but it's like, you never ever watched like F Troop? TV show F Troop about the U.S. Cavalry. It's supposed to be a comedy. I barely watch it. I think it's that funny. U.S. Cavalry was sent out into the West, was organized to pacify the Western territories, to enforce federal law, of course it's all federal land, law by the federal government, so it's different, under a different status than like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or New Jersey, which were original colonies and original states. But anyways, had to enforce federal law and to enforce and protect the treaties that were had with the Indians. Because Indians were treated like separate nations. They weren't treated like, as people were running over, the government recognized it was their land. So made treaties with all these various groups and tribes, and the treaties had to be, kept, right? And that was the job of the U.S. Cavalry. Guys out there, uniforms on horses, so they're called cavalry, riding around in the West, keeping the peace. Or were they? Enforcing the treaties? Or did they? They enforced the treaties in favor of the Indians or in favor of the U.S. government? In favor of the Native Americans or in favor of the white settlers who started moving into their lands? White settlers, is it? Yeah. It's always the way it is. At this time, the government was always on the side of us. This is true. You couldn't get a fair shake. Even if you were a Native American, if you weren't white. So yeah, so they were supposed to enforce these treaties. They didn't, especially when, natural resources were valuable. Natural resources were found on Indian land, on the Indian nation's land, I should say, like gold or coal or whatever. And then settlers, well, not just white people. I shouldn't just dump it all on, but Americans poured into the region. The Indians are like, hey, you're invading our borders. We have a treaty. So we just changed the terms of the treaty. Said, okay, we gave you this land, but we found gold over here. Okay, so we're going to change the treaty now. It's this land, and the part that has gold in it, that's no longer yours. And if you don't like it, well, the cavalry will. So there was the soldiers. And I say I don't want to dump it all on my white people because there were also black units, African American units of the U.S. Cavalry. The Indians called them buffalo soldiers because of the color of their skin, who also did this. So, so there were the Indian Wars in the late 1800s. There were uprisings amongst the Indian nations because they felt they were being mistreated. And so they sent the U.S. Cavalry in. One group of U.S. cavalry was sent to a place called Little Bighorn with a general named General Custer, who's a very flamboyant individual, and thought that he was a little bit too sure of his resources. And when he showed up, there were all sorts of Native Americans there, and he was surrounded, and the Native Americans came to play. they That was quick. And they massacred them. They killed all of them. All of them. They wiped out. Well, maybe some of them fled. Some of the cavalry were able to flee for their lives and be saved. But almost the whole cavalry regiment was wiped out by the Indians at the Battle of Little Bighorn. So he was there. Nicholas Black Elk was there. He was killing our soldiers, fighting for his people, the Lakota people, to defend their territory. They eventually lost, of course. The Indian Wars were eventually lost because we just sent in more. We had more than they did, better equipment, better guns, better technology, and eventually we were able to, as I said, pacify the West, meaning them. The natives that were still there. Yeah, because you don't really pacify the Rocky Mountains, do you, Ms. Mia, right? You don't really pacify a mountain. Pacify people. Yeah. Anyways. So he was there. He was a medicine man in his community, a medicine man. So a religious figure, like a shaman, would people would go to him for healings and stuff like that. He'd pray to the spirits or invoke the spirits over people. And in 1904, well, his wife became a Christian and a Catholic. His wife converted to Catholicism before him, and then she died. So he still didn't become a Catholic. His wife in 1904 became a Catholic. But after she died, Black Elk decided to become a Catholic as well. And he was a Catholic in his own Native American way. He mixed Catholicism with certain elements of Lakota religion. I mean, he apparently had the belief, he did not deny the belief, but he saw that, there were certain things in his culture that were certainly compatible with Christianity. Being a Christian didn't mean he had to get rid of certain things in his culture. Okay, I mean, that might be a little controversial, but whatever. Who am I to judge? Anyways, in 1932, he became famous because he wrote a book, or someone interviewed him and wrote a book about him called Black Elk Speaks. So he became better known outside of his community, and apparently he was just a good and holy man. And so in 2016, the Diocese of Rapid City, South Dakota, I don't know why, I'm assuming that maybe at the time South Dakota was part of the Wyoming Territory. Might have been bigger than it is today, as the state is today. I'm assuming. But anyways, they claimed the authority over Black Elk to open his cause, and so he is a servant of God. I think that's still what he is. He's the servant of God, Nicholas Black Elk. If I'm wrong on that, I'd have to check Wikipedia, just update my knowledge. But when I wrote these notes down, he was still a servant of God. I don't know if he's become venerable yet. I don't think so. I think he's still a servant of God. So I asked servant of God, Nicholas Black Elk, to please pray for us who live in this beautiful, beautiful nation, which is part of your people's land, and pray for your people who are still here with us, that God may bless them. Amen. And that's a real picture of it. Oh yeah, one time I think this is a picture he joined, what's the guy's name? Wild Bill, what's his name? It was like a circus, a circus, but a Western themed circus that went around. And my guy Wild Bill Hickok or something. Anyways, I'm trying to remember the name of what they called the circus. Well, anyways, and it had a whole bunch of Native Americans in it and cowboys, and they do all sorts of horse tricks and rope tricks and all sorts of other things. And he joined it for a period of time. So I think this is a picture from the time when he was part of that circus. But anyways, this is an actual picture of him as a younger man wearing Lakota garb. All right. There we go. Oh, da da da. You learn something new every day, don't you, Mr. Cummings? Yes, Mr. Cummings? No, Mr. Cummings? That is Mr. Cummings back there, right? You look like a cyber criminal, sir. You look like you're about to hack something. To insert malware. I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't say that. I apologize. Okay. A comment I guess maybe I'll go back 2 steps because there was a comment I wanted to make that I guess I didn't make. I told you that the word ecclesia or church was the translation for the Hebrew kahal, the assembly of Israel. And that's how the group of the Jews were described. They were the kahal Israel, not the people of Israel, but more properly the assembly of Israel, the community of Israel, the church, if you will, of Israel. Okay? So it's not like the church is separate from Israel just because, and by Israel, I'm not talking about the modern nation state of Israel. I'm talking about Israel, the people, the Jewish people. There's something you have to remember about the history. When Jesus was a Jew, there were different flavors of Judaism, but there was a general, you could say, Judaism religion, okay? All right, maybe not so specified because, as I said, there were different flavors, okay? I already mentioned that, people had different beliefs about things, and yet they were Jewish. But there were some things everyone agreed on, like the Torah, circumcision, the kosher laws for eating food, stuff like that, synagogue service, there are certain things. But other beliefs, like I mentioned, the resurrection of the dead or the Messiah, angels or something, there might be some differences, or there were differences, I should say, as Franco Zamora. There were differences. But it's not like you have Judaism and then you have the separate religion, Christianity, okay? Like they're two different religions, okay? Although in my world religions class, I will treat them that way. But I will explain this in that class if you take it with me as well. If you thought about doing maybe a philosophy or a religious studies minor or double major, especially the philosophy, Ms. Peralty, I recommend it. Philosophy helps you think. It helps you think. And if you're going to do psychology, the study of the mind, you need to know how to think. But more importantly, you need to know how the mind does not think so well. Philosophy is very helpful for that. Anyways, just a suggestion, a little shout out. It's self-interested. I admit it, Ms. Lacey. I'm not going to lie. Anyways, but we're really not talking about two different religions here. Oh, Mr. Tedeschi, wouldn't you come in? We're really not talking, Mr. Tedeschi, about two different religions. There was the Jewish people with their beliefs in Jesus, and then Jesus changes everything. Now you have some Jews, a small group of Jews, who believe that the Messiah has come in Jesus. So they believe they're followers of Jesus, the Messiah. Christianism is Christ. But most Jews do not accept Jesus as the Messiah. But both groups are still Jewish, still full of Jews. All right? As I told you with the apostles in Luke's description of the early church, they were still going to the temple, were still saying their prayers as Jews. All right? They had certain practices they had in honor of the Christ, like the breaking of the bread, okay, which was Jesus' own ceremony that he made up for his followers. Baptism, okay. A lot of them still seem to be practicing circumcision of their children, male children, I should say. Although baptism was another step, being a Christian, a Jew who followed the Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. So you don't have two different religions until most of the Jews kind of die out of the church, I would say. They don't leave, but they just die out, and they get overwhelmed by non-Jews, what are called Gentiles, people of the nations, like me. Okay? We start, it's like when you've got your own special little place, like, I don't know, a bakery or some place that you go to, or maybe your little spot on campus that you go to read, and then all of a sudden everybody finds out about it, and all these people are there, and all the chocolate-filled croissants are bought out before you can get it. That's how everyone heard, oh, this bakery's great, best in town. Nobody knew about it, then they all find out, right? Or, everyone's now reading in this area, this beautiful, sunny, comfortable area now. Everyone's there with their computers and tablets and phones and whatnot. You're not alone anymore. They've all found it. Through word of mouth. Anyway. I usually have that with well, that gets me with millennials. No offense. Because you shouldn't stereotype. You don't have to give every group of people a name. Millennials, generation this, generation, whatever. What are you? What are you then?
Gen.
They're calling you Gen Z? Oh, no, but you're in your 20s, right? You're like 19, 20?
Yeah, that's.
So what, millennials are in their 20s and later?
They're like in their their 30s, 40s.
Really? Wow. That passed me by fast.
We're on Gen Alpha now.
What are you?
Feel bad for the next one.
Gen Y.
Bully.
No,
Or no, am I Generation X? I forgot. Generation X.
baby.
Well, this will happen to you. You know, if you have a special TV show or musician that you listen to and you love the person, you collect their stuff or you watch the show and stuff like that, nobody knows about it, you know what I'm saying?
Already. Happened to me already.
Wait,
Oh, okay, then you know what I'm talking about. 72. Like, you know, well, you guys don't know much. Huh? Gen X. All right, well, wonderful. Anyways. It's like, you know, but it's funny because in the 70s, you knew your zodiac sign. That was what you were known for. Oh, I'm a Sagittarius. I'm a Libra. I'm a Virgo. But now it's all, oh, I'm Gen this. I'm millennial. I'm Gen this or Gen. Just change. It's the same kind of.
what's your zodiac sign?
Doesn't matter. I'm a Christian. It doesn't matter. But thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Anyways, all right. You know, okay. I made my point. So now all the Gentiles, these non-Jews, are pouring in. They're finding out about Jesus. They're liking what they hear. Okay, they're experiencing Jesus. Their belief through their belief in Jesus. They're having, you know, they're having a better life, I guess, or better spiritual experience. And the Jews kind of get elbowed or pushed out. So it becomes primarily a Gentile group. But it's still Judaism. It's just not the same kind. So there's a separation. What scholars call, you have a separation between rabbinical Judaism, Judaism dominated by rabbis and teachers, and then you have Christianity, which is the Judaism of those who accept Jesus as the Messiah. So Christianity is all full of Jewish elements. It's because it's essentially Judaism that accepts the Messiah, but with most of its members, 99.9%, being of Gentile descent, non-Jewish descent as well. So it's really for them. The church is for them. It is the Kahal Israel. Even in the letter to the Galatians, St. Paul refers to the church as the Israel of God. It is still Israel. And the hope of the church, at least I as a Gentile, because I don't want to like Gentile splain, if that's a word, to any Jews in the classroom, or Jewish people, I should say. I guess Jews is a bad word, but Jewish people is fine. All right. Even though it means the same thing. All right, fine. I don't want to offend anybody. But I'm not trying to like goy explain to you. But the church is yours, not mine. Even though it is mine because I'm part of it. But I'm following something that my ancient ancestors, not for them. They didn't have a Messiah. Anyways, so the Kahal, this is not just metaphor in this word that the Christians use to call their community. It's not just a metaphor. Like we're like Israel in a way. We've superseded them. We've succeeded them. Succession is different from supersession. Supersession means you get out of the way. You don't need them anymore. You know, we're beyond. We're off on our own now, doing our own thing. Just how, you know, if you read the history of the church can kind of act that way. But really it's supersession, or not supersession. It's succession, like we're going to talk with the apostles. There are differences, obviously, because, you know, I'm not Jewish. But that doesn't mean the Jews are put away in a closet or something like an old sweater. We don't need them anymore. No. The church succeeds Israel. There's still Israel and for Israel. That's totally what I'm saying here, just because I have to say this because of current events. Current events. Do not confuse the nation state of Israel with Judaism. All right? Yes, it is called a Jewish state, but again, if you take my world religions class, I will tell you that, you know, well over half, I believe, if I remember my certainly half, but well over half, I believe, of the Jews who are citizens of this Jewish state don't practice the religion, don't believe in it at all. You know, it's just completely non-religious. But their ethnicity is Jewish. You know, they had a Jewish mother, and so they're Jews, as people think. And then there's a minority in Israel that is religious. And out of that minority, some are just religious, some are very religious, and then some are very, very religious, Miss Farley. And they're the ones who kind of help control the government at the time. Are in the yes. So don't confuse Judaism with that, or the religion with that. That's something else. Let's keep the political stuff there. And yes, people still make religious claims and they kind of mix it all up with what's going on in the Middle East. Okay, fine. But that's for another cup of coffee during world religions if we want to talk about it. I'm talking about what the church, how the church views the Jews. Okay? And Israel. All right. So I've mentioned succession. Well, the apostles aren't going to be around forever. The apostles succeed Jesus. They don't replace him. There's no one who can replace him. I hope that's obvious. But as I also think is obvious, as I showed you, Jesus gives a lot, I could say delegate, but he just gives a lot of his authority to the apostles. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, like the same authority. Jesus forgives sins. He says, hey guys, you can forgive sins now. Jesus can raise the dead. He says, you can raise the dead. I want you to raise the dead. Jesus preaches the kingdom of God and teaches about it. He says, you go out and now you preach about the kingdom of God in my name. The main thing, the special sauce for the apostles that, is distinct from Jesus is that they're witnesses of his resurrection. Okay, the risen Jesus is unique. For now, Mr. Cummings. But even Christians forget this. Yes? And I mentioned this before a few classes ago when you say the creed during Mass, if you go to a Catholic Mass. Oh, by the way, did anyone go to, I got to make a correction. I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. If you want to tell me, did anyone go to Mass on Sunday? Huh? No. Don't tell me no. No, I don't want to, I'm not trying to shame anybody, but I have a purpose for it. If anyone went to Mass on Sunday, did you notice that the priest might have been wearing white vestments, white clothing, and the deacon? Can I ask you if you want? Huh?
Bishop.
At your church this Sunday? Why was he there?
Well, there is budget.
Oh, that's nice. But he wasn't wearing, okay, so he was doing confirmation. Okay, so he was just like visiting, right? Visiting the parish? Was he wearing white? Do you remember? Well, yeah, I know they try and I hate that stuff. Yeah, because I know there's buff, there's white, there's eggshell, there's this. All right, fine. I just want white to be white, blue to be blue, green to be blue, whatever. Okay, so we were creamy.
Yeah.
Did you notice him or hear him mention anything about the Lateran Basilica in Rome? Oh, okay. So telling you how busy he's been.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk. That's the bishop of Islam. Well, it's busy being a shepherd. No, he's in the sheep. It's like herding cats. So Mr. Gaffney, anybody? Okay, so they're wearing white vestments if you went. Hopefully. Maybe they mentioned the Lateran Basilica. Maybe. Yes.
A baptism 2 weeks ago?
Yes. Okay, that's great. I appreciate that comment. Doesn't help. No, it doesn't help. It needs to be this Sunday. It's past Sunday. Okay. Well, if you went, you would have seen probably the priest and the deacon dressed in white. That's the color for the saints and stuff like that, or certain celebrations. And it was the feast day of the dedication of St. John Lateran Basilica, which is important for at least the Catholic Church. Wow! Miss Franco Zamora. Well, when have I mentioned St. John Lateran before? I mentioned that, I'll give you a hint, Ms. Roberts. It was in the context of Vatican II when I was explaining my second Vatican Council. Why is it Vatican? I kind of segued into Lateran, right? Do you remember Lateran? The Lateran Basilica in Rome? Lateran? You think so? All right, you're getting somewhere. Yeah, this is a lot of work for me to just correct myself. I should have just told you what I was wrong. Anyways, but I try to reinforce. Well, I'm trying to reinforce, you know? All right, Mr. Trell. I'll just tell you. The Vatican, I told you it's called the Vatican because it's on a hill called the Vaticanus in Rome, right? There is hills in Rome. But I made a mistake. I said the Lateran Basilica, which is the Pope's official church, not St. Peter's. The Lateran, that's why it was celebrated as a solemnity. It was celebrated on Sunday. But it's the official church of the Pope, where he sits at Bishop of Rome. But I said St. John Lateran because it's on the Lateran Hill. That was my mistake. Actually, it's not the Lateran called the Lateran because it's on a hill called the Lateran, but the area in which the church is apparently was owned by the Lateran family. There's some rich family in Rome at the time, the way back when, in like the 300s or 400s AD, who owned the land, and somehow the church got it eventually, so they still call it the Lateran. So I apologize for that. That was my mistake. Make that correction to your notes, please, if you want to. Note the correction. I give you a question about that on the quiz. I think I caught it before I did the quiz, so I don't think I made that mistake. At least not in the question. Maybe in the answers, Miss Peter. The answers don't matter if they're wrong. This time I'm right. But
Now that I remember, it's more fun. It really said modern, yeah. It's more said in the church.
yeah.
That one.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's fine. Was that the, I'm assuming you live around here, right? Was it the, no, so you're not from Philly area. Is that part of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia? So was it the Bishop of Philadelphia, the Archbishop, or was it some of the lesser bishops of
I don't know. Is that
like knowing your Congress, right? Or Congress. Who's your senator? Who's the senator of Pennsylvania? You only have to remember two names, Mr. Gaffney.
Yes. Spring Ferry, right? He's watching.
Show me up. Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Okay. So it's the mother church because it's the church of the Bishop of Rome. So that's why it's being celebrated. Okay. Why was I going to tell? Oh, yes, I wanted to correct that mistake. But succession, no one replaces Jesus, but apparently Jesus, if I'm reading the Gospels correctly, just reading even them literally, Jesus gives spiritual powers to his apostles that he apparently intends to continue after he's gone. Because he tells them so. He tells them. No, not this. Go back to Acts of the Apostles, chapter 1 of Luke's part 2 of his gospel. I'll read this, but if you want to follow along, chapter 1. Acts of the Apostles, chapter 1 is... How's it going, Ms. Jones? What's shaking? Huh? I'll read it because, it's just brief. Okay, so beginning of chapter 1, I'm in verse 3. Luke tells us, Jesus presented himself alive. He wants to make that clear. It was not a vision or an hallucination. He presented himself alive to the apostles by many proofs after he had suffered. So he had to prove it to them. They're empiricists too back then. People want proof. And just tell me you saw Bigfoot. I want a picture, not even a fuzzy picture. I want a good picture. Or maybe some hair or something from Bigfoot. proofs after he had suffered, appearing to them for 40 days and speaking about the kingdom of God. So I guess he gave them further teachings about the kingdom of God, even after the resurrection. Ooh, remind me to come back to that, Mr. Hinkle, please. And if Mr. Hinkle forgets Mr. Tedeschi, remind me about the resurrection. I want to say something else about that. While meeting with them, he enjoined them to stay in Jerusalem. Okay, then we skip down to verse 6. When the apostles had gathered together, they asked Jesus, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? They still don't get it. There's some of them are still expecting a political Messiah. Okay, now that you've been glorified, you have the power. Are you now going to restore the kingdom of Israel? Jesus, he doesn't say no, but he doesn't say yes in the way they want. He answered them, it is not for you to know. So I'm not going to tell you. The Father has established this by his own authority. So it's Jesus may know, but it's none of your business. That's God's business. Let God worry about that when he's going to do that. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. So now he starts talking about this Holy Spirit thing to them more and more. And you will be my witness. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria. So see like a concentric circle with the city, then the wider environs of Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So everywhere, basically. That's why Luke ends his gospel, he does end his gospel. He ends Acts of the Apostles with Paul preaching the gospel of the kingdom in Rome, the ends of the earth for Luke. Okay? Where am I here? Oh, I got no notes. How am I doing this without notes? I don't understand. Okay. So succession. So the apostles, Jesus, and then Jesus ascends into heaven. Okay, so he's gone. I mean, not really gone, Ms. Miller, but he's gone in a way. He's not physically present anymore that, he's sitting somewhere and we can send him notes or texts and ask him questions, right? He left the apostles. But what happens when the apostles are gone? They're human beings. They're dying. And this is, I guess, where I can kind of insert about the resurrection of the dead. They will come back. Something people forget. They think like the resurrection of the dead is something, again, unique to Jesus. God is a generous God. I mean, God's not like, miserly, like, oh, this only happens to me because I'm special. I have the ring of power. No one else can have it. I'm in control. That's interesting. Think God's in control? Think God's in control, really? Really? Well, why doesn't he control us? We're out of control, aren't we? Look, if I have a gun and I'm going to shoot somebody to death, why doesn't God intervene and say, no, I'm in control, put the gun down, go about your life now? I told you, thou shalt not kill, right? Remember? Yes, Lord, I remember. You're God, isn't he? God is free will. I guess so. Kind of silly to do so, don't you think? I mean, do you really love what you're doing? You intentionally control it, you don't let it be itself. Well, when you have, I don't know if you're ever going to have kids, but, you see the kid reaching to the stove or to the fireplace, are you going to let him do it, find out, or are you going to tell him to stop? Well, so you're going to control him. You start to get very, yeah. Might you even grab the child and pull it away? Perhaps. Yeah, perhaps. If it's serious, right? So you are okay with physical and mental controls then? To a certain degree. Yeah. So you won't really love your kid as fully as I think. Not as fully as God loves him. Anyways, that's an excellent point, sir. But that's for, I guess, a bit of theology, maybe philosophy of God. Anyways, my point is, Even the resurrection, the rising from the dead, is not something God holds to himself. If you went to Catholic Mass, Mr. Closa, the bishop, I'm sure, said the creed. Maybe you said it along with him, and at the end of the creed, it says, I believe in the resurrection of the flesh. It says of the dead. I wish they would retranslate that. It's not what it says in the Latin. It says in the flesh. People don't want that and say in the of the body, okay? Because your soul is immortal, according to Christian teaching, the church's teaching. Your soul, your spiritual soul, once it's created by God, never dies. Okay, so according to Christian teaching, yes, you do go on forever. You have a beginning point, you're created, but your soul goes on forever. Your body does not. Your body's material, it's a machine. Like everything, every other type of machine, matter breaks down. That's physics, basic physics, entropy. Okay, things break down. Okay, that's how it works. God's okay with that. But God can also bring it back and make and glorify the body to make it as eternal as the soul and reunite. That's what life is. The soul leaves the body, that's death. The soul returns to the body, it's life. We know that. I mean, been to an emergency room and someone's flatlined and they're dead, you know, for a period of time. Maybe for a long period of time sometimes, in weird cases. Brain is flat, heart's flat, and then something happens, you know?
We will now talk about that, please.
Huh?
We will now talk about
Oh, sorry. Excuse me? Thank you. Yeah, let me know, please. Let me know. Anyways, so yes, resurrection for all of us. So Jesus is not unique in this. He's the firstborn of the dead, as they keep calling him in, what Paul keeps calling him in the letters. He's the firstborn son of the dead, but he's the firstborn of many sons and daughters. Or I should say brothers and sisters, but you get my drift. Okay. So yes, the apostles die. They will come back, I believe, as I will, hopefully in a much thinner, svelter body, I hope, with more hair. Well, with all the hair I should have had. Anyways, and we need people to replace them. Well, not replace them. You can't replace their role because they're the apostles, okay? But you need people to succeed them in the same power and authority that Jesus had, at least if you want the church to continue. You could say, well, you don't really need them for that. Okay, but then is it the same church that Jesus seemed to have intended for his followers? He gave the apostles all these powers, told them to go to the ends of the earth, okay. I'm assuming he knew that some of them would eventually die or be killed. So you need successors, apostolic succession. The belief that the power Jesus gave to the apostles could be passed on. Okay? Some Christians don't believe in this. Okay? There are a lot of Protestant Christians that just believe Jesus just gave it to the apostles. Once the apostles were gone, it was gone with them. Okay? That's why a lot of the, maybe you could say conservative or traditional Protestant denominations are kind of always talking about going back to the apostolic age. They always want to reform the church back to the time of the apostles. Okay? Yeah. Because that's when the power was there. And that's also when the power ended, once the last apostle died. Okay? Problem with that is that we know that so much happened after the apostles in the first century. You already know this from the canon of scripture. Like the Bible wasn't even decided for Christians. They still weren't completely 100% sure what to make of Jesus. They knew he was a man and he knew he was God. As Jews, they didn't know how that fit. So there's so many other things that just worked in, that it doesn't really work historically. But okay, I get them. I get it. But if Jesus intended it to continue, I would assume he gave a way or a manner for it to continue. Right? It's one of the things when I was, actually, it's a good example, but I'll move on. I made my point. And I think I'll skip over Clement. There's a little quote that demonstrates the early Christian belief, but maybe I'll just move on to the meat of the matter, which is the principle of apostolic succession. how is their descent from the apostles? How is the ministry actually passed on? Well, through the sacrament, well, through you have a sacrament, holy order, structure, the sacrament of structure. And you touch the person, okay? Touching is a big thing, all right, in the sacraments, okay? So you touch the man, the person that you want to transfer your power to, okay? That's, how it should be done for the sacrament to take effect. Nevertheless, I got you, sir. You're fine. Just my OCD. So there's a direct connection, one might call a church lineage, an ecclesial lineage to the apostles. What does that mean? Well, it means it's not just a symbol. It's not just a symbolic connection of spirit, like, oh, we're teaching in the same way the apostles taught, the same doctrine and stuff, which is important. No, it's personal, that the church is directly founded on the power, has had the power transmitted personally to others from the actual men themselves. So ultimately, it goes back to these 12 men, minus Judas, but then we got Matthias. So the 12 apostles, it goes back to them. That's why they're so important. That's why they're everywhere in the gospel story. And if that, it blows your mind or doesn't make sense to you, well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, just think of natural stuff like us. There are like maybe 7.5 billion of us on the planet right now, right? Maybe approaching 8 billion. Yeah. And logically, and we know genetically, we came from two pairs. There's a female of us and a male of us, and somehow they hooked up somewhere. Or a small group of them hooked up somewhere. Not exactly sure, somewhere in Central and Southern Africa. Maybe if they get better genetic studies, they'll be able to pinpoint it more exactly. But somewhere around the middle of Africa, our great-great-grandpappy and grandmom bumped into each other. Thank God for that. Because, different species can't intermingle, but thank God, it's Adam wasn't trying to do it with a chimpanzee, You found another human. Hey, you're like me. But you're different. And I'm different from you, but like Legos, we seem to go together. And just in the right ways. And when we do go in together in the right ways, just like with Legos, you have a nice castle. Or in the case of us, you have us. Where do you think we came from? A lot of people having sex from the very beginning. I know, okay, moving on. So there's a direct connection, even to them, of this power. Do we have documents and records going? I got you. Give me 1 second. Let me finish the thought. Do we have documents and records going back to the 1st century signed by Peter, the apostle himself, or signed by Andrew saying, I ordained Silvanus on this day and made him a bishop? No, we don't. All right. So, all right, you got me on that one. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have Adam's or Eve's driver's license, but well, they weren't the only people per se. There apparently were other hominids roaming around, but had not evolved or developed to the point that apparently we did. But, there were other hominids around. You could say types of human beings, Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, stuff like that, Homo habilis, a man that could use tools and stuff. But then somewhere along the way, maybe I told you this already, one of our ancestors, or some, I don't know if it was Adam or Eve, or both of them, figured out that 1 + 1 = 2. It's like, the invention of fire, One of our ancestors, made a spark and some fire came of it and said, oh, so that's how that works. And it changed human history. Someone figured out, if you're taking Encountering Sacred Writings with Robin and me, some human being figured out that, yeah, talking is good, but you know what? If I actually put a symbol to every little sound that I'm making, I can write that on a piece of paper and I can send it away to people who aren't even here and they can know what I'm thinking and saying. So no, I wasn't there. Ultimately, they came from the creation of the soul comes from God. Yeah. Comes from God. So whenever they got a soul, the creature that was us got a soul, it comes from God. The body, that's a whole other question. You don't want to confuse the material aspect with the supernatural. Yeah, did God create us ultimately? Yes, he made Adam and Eve. That's true. Okay, that's the simple answer. That's a simple answer, which people can handle. All right, you can't go into the long answer because then it becomes like this class where, people So yes, there is a direct connection, but there's also an indirect connection. There is a spiritual lineage, because it's not enough that one of the apostles just laid hands on you and gave you power. You have to be orthodox. You have to believe what the apostles believe. It's not like, okay, Peter laid his hands on me and made me a bishop or an overseer as well, in the line of the apostles. But, the whole Jesus really rose from the dead that Peter says he saw and experienced it. Okay, I'm not really, I think it's more of a spiritual thing. Jesus was just spiritualized and glorified, like the Gnostic Christians thought. No! Heretic! You might be a true bishop through the laying on of hands, but you are not part of the apostolic lineage indirectly through the teaching. You are teaching what is incorrect. So Christians, it's not just enough that you get the power. That's what some people like. They want their hands, their palms oil, or oil poured over their head and be a bishop and get that power. You have to believe, be a believer, and continue in the gospel that was preached by the apostles. It was not your teaching. It's not what you would like to have happened to Jesus or Jesus to have said. You should be repeating the message of the apostles. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling death by death. Come on, Mr. Tedeschi, you know the words. And to those in the tombs, granting life. Right? The teaching of the church is only apostolic if it conforms to the apostles' message. And that's where the overseer comes in, the bishop, Mr. Closa, which you experienced on Sunday, the overseer. There's got to be somebody, So direct and indirect, that's where the bishop comes in. So I had you read, I should say I had you read because I'm not controlling you, Ms. Franco Zamora. But I asked you, I invited you to read, Mr. Palumbo, the first and second letters of Paul to Timothy and the letter of Paul to Titus, where these structures come up and are discussed by Paul. Okay? Did this structure of an overseer, or what we call a bishop, an elder, or what we call a priest or a presbyter, or a servant, we call a deacon. Was this all decided upon? It just plopped right down. Well, you should know by now, Mr. Gaffney. No, not even the New Testament just plopped right down. It developed. It had to be written. And the same thing with this understanding. Okay? How is the apostles' ministry to be asserted? Okay? And so you see that, for example, in the letters of Paul, he mentions these three orders that are established in the church. The highest one seems to be the overseer, episkopos. which is exactly what episkopos means. Scopos, like telescope, to see over. I'm glad that's funny to you, Ms. O'Brien. Episkopos only makes me laugh. Yeah, episkopos. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a dirty mind today. I apologize. Overseer, bishop. Elder, presbyter in Greek means exactly that. Elder, one who is older, an older person. Elder is exactly what it means. Priest, yeah, it comes to be priest, but priest is different. Priest offers sacrifice. Priest actually should be more properly and theologically applied to the overseer. Get to that in a moment. And then you've got a helper, a servant. Diakonos, diakoneo in Greek means to serve. So you have a servant. So that's exactly, their titles, yeah, they become fancy titles with other words later, but the basic meanings, they're the same thing. An overseer, an elder, and a servant. And in the early church, it has to develop. You see this in Paul's letters, like in 1st and 2nd Timothy, he talks about definitely overseers. He also talks about that in Titus, but he also in Titus tells this man Titus, who we don't know, he's a saint, yes, and he's an apostle. He's not a true apostle, but he went out and preached the gospel. He brought it to the island of Crete. I think I showed you where Crete was. Didn't I ask that as a question on one of the quizzes on the map? Show me where the island of Crete is, because I mentioned it in the class. No. Ah. It's part of the country of Greece now. It might not be in the future because there is an independence movement, but this island down here is the island of Crete, okay? And so apparently Paul sends Titus to Crete to establish presbyters in all the churches. I guess they didn't have them before. And that's, so, oh, wait, they didn't have bishops or presbyters in their churches for, yeah, some churches probably didn't. They didn't have the structure. It hadn't developed yet. People hadn't thought about it. They were just Christians loving Jesus, reading the scriptures that they had, doing, the Lord, maybe even doing the Lord's Supper is what they thought. Probably, no, the Lord's Supper, they're pretty much figured out that was the overseer's job. But whatever, okay? So some people might be like, oh, well, he doesn't mention, he does mention overseers, but there seems to be this difference. Now there's a presbyter or an elder. What's going on here? Well, development. We're seeing the early developments, I think. The functions of the presbyter and the overseer were kind of one and the same for a while. The overseer, it wasn't easy to maybe distinguish between overseer and presbyter or elder. So, they were, the same word was for the one person. And what eventually happens is because the overseer, as the bishop was telling you, Mr. Closa, with his confirmations, can't be everywhere. Can't be everywhere. CEO can't be everywhere. So he has, vice presidents and other people who represent him, like our president has ambassadors throughout the world that represent President Trump to foreign governments. Okay. So the bishop, once you had a lot of Christians and a lot of little communities, the bishop couldn't be everywhere. So he delegates. That's where the term elder gets specifically reserved for this delegate of the overseer. The overseer has the fullness of the power. He's like an apostle. He's not an apostle exactly, because only the apostles witnessed the risen Christ. They have that. And they were chosen by Jesus specifically. Whoever became overseer later, they were chosen by the apostles to succeed. So there's a difference. So just be aware of that. The bishop is not an apostle. He's a successor to the apostles. Yes? Apostolic succession. Not replacement. So he's not another apostle. Apostleship does die with the apostles. There's no one like the apostle. But it's passed on, but it continues in the church by the spiritual authority passed on. So the overseer has the fullness of authority, the fullness of the priesthood of Jesus Christ. forgive sins, offer the Lord's Supper, do all the sacraments, confirmation, Mysticlosa. Mysticlosa, the bishop should properly do, it does in the West, not in the East. But eventually, these are delegates, elders, who receive some of the power of the bishop. He ordains them, he lays hands on them, saying, okay, now this is what I want you to do. But what are the essential things you need to do in the local church? Again, the Lord's Supper, celebrate the Lord's Supper. You have that power and authority. To forgive sins, yes, you can forgive sins. Some sins might still be reserved to the bishop, to forgiveness, okay? But for the most part, you can go to confession to a priest. In some cases, do confirmation. Depends. In the Western Church is big on having the bishops do it. So, the bishop comes to your church whenever he comes to your church, usually when you're around 14 years old. A bunch of 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds taking front. In the Eastern Church, they decided very early on that's not going to work, because it's part of baptism. So every priest, when he baptizes, has the power to confirm. He does confirmation to preach the gospel. You need permission from the bishop to preach the gospel. Same thing for deacons as well. So, I mean, if a bishop hears that one of his elders is saying things that are not true or not the faith, and it's verified, you say, I take away your mandate to preach the gospel. You can not. Maybe he'll say, you still celebrate the Eucharist? He still has no faith. He knows. He doesn't, then you can't even celebrate the Eucharist or hear confessions. But if some deacon in a parish or an elder is saying something wacky, the bishop might say, okay, you need to take some time off. I don't give you permission. I have a mandate from the overseer of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. At the time, it was Bishop Chaput, not Bishop Chaput anymore. But yeah, years ago when I was hired here, I wrote to the Archdiocese of Philadelphia for a mandate to teach theology because it's a sacred science. It's under the jurisdiction of the church. And I just wanted to, get that permission. There's no controlling. It's almost a formality in some ways. But no, it's nice to ask for. You don't have to ask for it, but I did. And I got a very nice letter from Bishop Chaput, which I submitted here at Gwynedd Mercy. He could take away that mandate. The bishop could, the archbishop, if he found I was teaching wrong things to you. Which makes me think maybe I shouldn't record these things. Maybe I shouldn't put them on YouTube. One too many jokes about Jesus, But even if he took away the mandate, I probably would still be able to teach here, if that means anything anymore. Yes, I put them on YouTube. You can find the address where it's all in the syllabus, Ms. Hoy. So then they found that even the elders needed help, and the bishops and the elders needed help. So they developed this idea of a servant, a deacon, deacons are really servants of the bishop. They're really the bishop's servants, although you see them in parishes serving the priests. So they also serve the priest, but technically they're servants of the bishop, but nevertheless, anyway. So the bishop will lay hands on the guy for service, not for priesthood. That's reserved to the elder. The elder does all the priestly things like offering the Holy Mass, forgiving sins, stuff like that. But stuff that's not related to the priesthood, the deacon can do. So the deacon can preach the gospel at Mass, or preach the gospel, and do certain sacraments that don't require a priest, like baptism or something like that. Can't do confirmation or anointing of the sick because those require the priesthood. So that's not good. So deacons are also mentioned by Paul in his letters. These are all mentioned, but in different ways. Okay, so just be aware of that. And if you're wondering why, this is confusing because Paul mentions these things, and sometimes he's talking about a bishop and sometimes an elder. I should say, keep mixing my language. Sometimes an overseer and sometimes an elder. What are they different? Are they one and the same? Because he seems to give some of the same kind of qualifications for an overseer as he does for an elder. Like he could be married or should be married. Somehow I always get back to sex, Miss Abraham Bellarmine, right? Well, I shouldn't say that. Marriage does not necessarily include sex, especially after you have a baby. I'm not lying. Ask your parents, ask your mom and dad when you came into their life. Until you grew up. Why do you think parents want pre-K? They don't even want kindergarten anymore. They want pre-K. Now they want pre-pre-K. Get the kids somewhere, someone looking after them. So they can go to work. Wink, wink. Ask your parents. Well, they'll probably say, is this what I'm spending my money on at Gwynedd Mercy? Anyways. Nevertheless, marriage, okay? Well, people get kept up on this, especially with the clergy, like, especially in the Western Church. I'm Eastern Catholic, but I grew up in the Western Church, Roman Catholic. And yeah, there's a big thing about celibacy, not getting married. The clergy shouldn't get married. We don't want married clergy. All right, fine. And if you ask for married clergy, you're probably some kind of flaming liberal, some Catholic leftist, who wants to destroy the church. Well, okay. A little news flash here for you people. The Catholic Church has had married priests, and for a period of time, married bishops, but certainly married priests, ever since the beginning. Okay? Simon Peter was married. One of the apostles was married. Paul was not. Paul chose to remain single. But in one of his letters, he mentions that some of the other apostles brought their wives on their mission trips. So apparently, more than Peter of the apostles had a wife. Whether they were still exercising conjugal rights, I don't know. It's something that is none of my business. Okay? And we certainly know that some of the early popes were married, because I know that one of the popes, his son became pope later. Legitimately. This wasn't a scandal or anything. The guy was a married dude. He was ordained a bishop, became pope, Bishop of Rome. His son later. I have the names written down, so I'm trying to remember. It's Hyginus or who was the pope's name. But anyways, in the first 400 years, always been married priests in both East and West. It's only around 1,000 years ago that the Western Church, popes usually disliked the practice. They thought that, yes, you should give up marriage and give yourself totally to the church if you're going to be a minister of the church. But up until 1,000 years ago, there were still places where priests and deacons were married. And then finally, the Western Church brought down the hammer, but not the Eastern Church. No problem with it. If you do get ordained, you're not supposed to get married. But if you're married, you can get ordained. So there is that difference. And then bishops are supposed to be celibate. Yes, bishops should be unmarried. That developed later on, after hundreds and hundreds of years. So a lot of the bishops usually come from the monks, because monks were always celibate. Monks and nuns were always unmarried. So usually we get our bishops from amongst the monks. But it's possible to have married bishops as well. There's nothing absolute. It's not a teaching. It's a practice. It's a custom. Remember we talked about tradition, little traditions, customs, things that the church does and that can change. And I just mention it because some people flip out over it. They think it's a doctrine or a dogma of the church. It's part of being a priest. It's not. My parish priest at St. John the Baptist Ukrainian Catholic Church, who has a wife and 2 children, is as much a priest. Bread and wine change into the body and blood of Christ. My sins are forgiven by him as much as when I go to Our Lady of the Lake, Roman Catholic, down the place where I grew up. And the celibate priest does the same thing for me. So scholars usually call this kind of mingling and mixing of the overseer and the elder, presbyter bishop. It's a scholarly term called presbyter bishops in the early church to kind of acknowledge that there was development that was taking place. There are presbyter bishops. They're kind of both. The separation, one and the same thing. The separation hadn't kind of happened yet, I guess you could say. So it's a scholarly term that they use where it's not completely clear that the functions are distinguishable or distinguished, but they are certainly different from a deacon. That is pretty clear. Okay. Oh, So, for example, I'll pass over. Well, okay, I guess I'll give you these definitions. Well, just look at these definitions on. I'll come back to them when we talk about the sacraments, but it's good to mention them now. Definition of a bishop is someone who succeeded to the ministry of the apostles and presides over the church in a certain area. Okay, so he had hands laid on him to receive specifically the power that the apostles received from Jesus, and he's given governance over a certain area of the church. Usually, not always. Sometimes guys are ordained bishops and they don't have any particular area, territory that they govern. They're just bishops. They're still bishops. But typically it should include, a diocese, a county. Diocese is simply, the church's word for a county in the church, the county of Philadelphia or something. The Diocese of Philadelphia is an especially big place like Philadelphia, a big city, then it's an archdiocese, a mega diocese, but a mega county of the church. But that this person is overseer, bishop. Okay. I'll move on to that. That's interesting, but move on. Yes, and this is where it mentions overseer in Titus, and then it mentions deacons. Actually, no, excuse me, no. He does not mention deacons. He mentions presbyters and bishops in his letter to Titus, but he says nothing to Titus about ordaining or establishing deacons throughout the churches. Does that mean that this was very early on and they hadn't come up with that idea yet? That hadn't developed yet? Hadn't developed in that area? Don't know. He just doesn't mention it. All right, it's just not there. It's just an argument from silence. Don't know. I might come back to orthodoxy and heresy, but anyways. 1 Timothy, yes, he mentions the threefold structure. It's apparently already known here. He mentions the bishop, the presbyter, and the deacon. Notice that he does mention female. There was the possibility of female deacons, women being deacons, not priests or bishops, though. That doesn't ever seem to be an option. I don't know why. I can't really give any reason. I've thought about it, but I can't really give any reasons other than the fact that just Jesus didn't do it. He didn't intend it for some reason. And even with female deacons, we know if we look outside the New Testament to history, they weren't the same as the male deacons. It wasn't apparently, they had the same name, but they were really kind of like to attend to the women during some of the sacraments. Because, especially for like the sacrament of baptism, which was done almost completely in the nude for most of the ceremony, you were nude, which was symbolism, because you're being reborn, yes, and you come out naked of your mother's womb. So that it's symbolism. You go into the water naked, be reborn. It's also symbolism of death, as when you're dead, you're buried naked. So you die with Christ. So coming out, Christ came out of the tomb naked. He died and he rose again. So when you come out of the waters of baptism, having died, and rise, you're naked again. Interesting. One last point, and then you can go, my people. In the Eastern Church, we still have this custom, not for adults. So those of you who might want to convert, don't worry. But for babies, yes. Babies are always, we keep the custom for babies. Babies are all, because babies are cute, Babies are baptized in the nude. They're naked whenever they're baptized. No pouring water over the head. Kids dunk down in the water 3 times in the nude, just like 2,000 years ago in the early church. Except we don't do it with adults anymore, because that might be a little bit creepy. And the church has already had enough lawsuits. So, but okay, I'll see you on Thursday. God bless you all.
So sorry. So,
Yes.
he's a priest, but he has a way of kids. We grew up as Episcopal.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Women are not priests.
Yes.
Priest, which was a woman.
Oh, yeah, I know. The Episcopal Church of America? Or is it African Methodist Episcopal? Methodist Episcopal?
No.
It's American Episcopal?
No, Haiti. It's like, well, I'll show you the sign. You didn't know that?
No.
So that's him. I wanted, because
Moi non parler Etienne. I love the Creole. But yeah, I wish I could speak it. I love the language. Oh, okay. So the Church of England is in Haiti. Hey, sir, did you talk to me? Okay, give me 1 second, please. Just 1 second, sir.
So this is the symbols. I want to give you that symbols.
Oh, yeah. That's Episcopal Church of America.
So that's like the same.
Okay.
That's the one we have as well.
Okay, but it's in Haiti.
Yeah.
Okay. I see.
I don't know if you ever heard of Cathedral. So it's like one of the biggest church in Haiti.
Cathedral? No, I'm not. I
I'll
haven't.
tell you on Thursday.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr.
My
Wojciechowski.
email about the paper that was due yesterday. It said October 10th. Did you mean November 10th or November 12th?
That was a mistake. Did you read? I know that was my mistake
Okay.
because Wednesday is the 12th.
Yeah.
It's November 12th.
Okay. I'm making
November
sure
12th?
I didn't.
That was my mistake. So go back to your emails because I did get an update. So it's
Okay.
November 12th. So remind me to mention that in class, please.
Okay. Because I wasn't too sure. I was like, you sent it after.
No, Ms.
October 12th.
Kelsey sent me an email. She almost immediately sent me an email with the same question.
Okay.
So thank you, sir. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I wasn't too sure about it. I was like, I'm going to ask you in class on too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Well, that's not going to happen. What is this for? Oh, God. Can't get around God and theology, right, Ms. Sniper? Oh, unless you're a Christian atheist. Guess you could. Oh, okay. So I could have looked at that. All right, fine. So I'm not going to worry about this. Excuse me. Not for now. Da 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 dee, da 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 dee. Oh, come on. Really? Hello, Mr. Lebedinsky. Oh, it's fine, thank you. Running behind as always. Huh. Christian metal compilation. This Messiah Prophet. I gotta watch some. All right.
I'm just here. I work it online.
Yeah, go away. Hello, ladies. Oh, thank you. Hello, gentlemen.
It's a cold one today, I'll tell you
Yeah,
what.
it's chilly. Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Okay. You told me. Where's my where's the there it is.
Different. Oh.
Oh,